What's going on YouTube? So midsize sedans are generally becoming more and more stylish as time goes on. But honestly, Mazda has been in the game long before the rivals caught on. This is a car that still turns heads, especially coming off the significant refresh that it received just last year. Of course, as always, we want to give a special shout out to our friends at Paul Miller Mazda for providing us with this beautiful crystal blue metallic Mazda 6. And if you're in the market for any new Mazda, be sure to stop by their dealership or visit them via their website, which we provided a link to in the video description. So with that stuff said, let's see if the 6 is still one of the best offerings in the class. So as always, starting off with the exterior styling, the Mazda 6 remains a really sharp looking sedan. Like I already mentioned, it was refreshed just last year, so those updates carry over, like the large mesh grille underscored by thick chrome trim. This design does carry over across all the models, except on the high-end Signature, which uses a gunmetal gray finish instead. Matching with the grille, the headlights also have a premium design, and they are fully LED across all the trims. Plus, if you go for the GT Reserve or Signature, you will also have auto-dimming abilities. As far as the back, again, nothing significant has changed, but you will notice that the font used for the badging has been updated to the latest version that debuted on the Mazda 3. Other than that, all models will continue to have dual chrome exhaust outlets and very premium full LED taillights. But overall, the Mazda 6 has always been a looker, and especially after the refresh last year, it looks a whole lot more expensive than it really is. Now, one of the other things that really make the design pop are these large wheels. They are 19-inch dark finished alloys, which are surprisingly standard on all but the very base model. The Sport instead comes with gray 17-inch alloys, and then there is a little bit of differentiation for the Grand Touring Reserve and Signature, which get a brighter silver finish. Now heading on up to the mirrors, starting on the Grand Touring level, you'll get heating and auto-dimming abilities. However, every 6 has blind spot monitoring with rear cross traffic alert. And then speaking of the safety systems, this is the biggest change for 2019. The base Sport trim now includes the entire iActive Safety Sense package, meaning that the whole lineup now has standard emergency braking with pedestrian detection, adaptive cruise control, lane keeping assist, and auto high beam headlights. This makes it one of the few midsize sedans that give you all the safety systems standard. Finally, ending things at the fuel tank, every 6 has a 16.4 gallon fuel tank, which is good for ranges of 476 miles with the standard engine and 443 miles with this turbo. Premium fuel is recommended for the turbo, but regular can be used if you're fine with a little power reduction. Well, that's it for the exterior, so now let's check out the luxurious cabin and see if anything has changed in there. So on every Mazda 6, besides for your base Sport trim, you're going to have their smart entry system with their typical smart entry key fob, not the newest version that came out with the Mazda 3. As far as getting inside the vehicle, there is not a sensor behind the handle, so you're just going to press the button to unlock. Alright, so checking out the cabin of the 2019 Mazda 6. Of course, since this just came off of a refresh, you're not going to see many changes, but it continues to have a very premium design. Now, as far as midsize sedans go, Mazda actually has an unusually high number of interior combinations you can get this car in. So starting with your base Sport, that's going to come with cloth seating in black or sand colors. And then when you go up for the Touring or the Grand Touring, which is what we have, you're going to be upgraded to this leatherette seating in those same two colors. Now when you go up to the Grand Touring Reserve, that's going to get you to real leather in parchment or black. And then when you go up to the top end Signature, that's going to give you further upgraded Napa leather, which is very premium, and that's going to be in parchment or a special deep chestnut color. Now turning over here to your door trim, it is very upscale across all the trims regardless of which one you choose. So you've got nice leather trimming here on the armrest as well as above it with a beautiful color contrast stitching. It is soft touch along the top, and then you have a faux aluminum trim here on the Grand Touring. As far as the windows, all 4 of them are one-touch automatic. Heading down here to your seat, all but your base model are going to come with power seats. However, if you go for the Grand Touring or the Touring, you're going to be missing the lumbar support. And then like I was saying, this is leatherette, but it's really nice leatherette. It definitely does a convincing job. And they give you an attractive stitching design even here on, you know, one of the lower level models. Like I was saying, the interior of the Mazda 6 is mostly unchanged, which is a good thing because it has one of the most luxurious cabins in the class for sure. It is backed up by very nice materials, so you have soft touch plastic across all of your upper parts. And then as you move down, you have really nice leatherette trim with stitching all through here as well as through this entire center part. Definitely really, classes things up a lot. Now if you go for the Signature, this would be switched out for a upscale suede. And then even down here along your lower areas, you've got more of that leatherette trim with the color contrast stitching, and everything fits together really solidly in that typical Mazda way. Now across every trim, you will find standard push button start. And when you press it, you will find this 8-inch display fire up. It does work with both the controller and with touch, though it is speed limited to 5 miles per hour. Alright, now what we're looking at here are these standard gauges. These come on the vast majority of the trims. However, the new digital gauges, they come on the Signature only, unlike in the Mazda 3 where it's actually standard across the board. But nevertheless, these are nice looking gauges, definitely have a sporty look with your tachometer, center mounted speedometer. And then over here you have a multi-function display which you can scroll through some basic information, but it definitely looks nice. In addition to that, you would have a head-up display if you had the Grand Touring Reserve or the Signature. Obviously we don't have it since this is the mid-level Grand Touring. Now coming back to the steering, of course it is electric power assisted, and Mazda has nicely included this leather-wrapped steering wheel across all the trims, even the base model. Now as far as your buttons, these are your standard audio, phone, and voice buttons, and then on this side you have your adaptive cruise control buttons. The other nice touch is rain-sensing wipers are standard on all but the very base model, so that's definitely actually a rare feature to even find in this class. Now as far as the wheel itself, it is manually tilt and telescoping, and it will also be heated on the Grand Touring Reserve and the Signature. Now moving on to interior storage, the Mazda 6 does fine for itself, though it is a little bit smaller than the Camry and Accord. Starting out with your center console here, you can just raise this up, and as you can see you have a small but nicely appointed storage bin. It is pretty deep and there is a felt lining down the bottom. Also inside you'll find 2 of your USB ports, including the one where you plug in your phone for Android Auto or Apple CarPlay, and then you also have a 12-volt outlet. Up in front of that we have a sliding little tray here. This reveals your 2 cup holders. And then in the very front you have another pretty large bin, definitely a great place for sticking a phone. Now, unlike some of the competition, Mazda has stuck with a traditional shifter, so it's very easy to use. You're just going to pull back for drive, and you can bump over here to the left to shift manually. Additionally, if you get one of the models equipped with a turbo engine, you will also find standard paddle shifters. Heading into reverse, you will find a standard backup camera across the lineup. This does not have active trajectory. However, if you go for the signature trim, you now have the ability to get a 360-degree camera system, which is a very nice touch for this class. And then back behind the shifter, you will find your electronic parking brake as well as your brake hold feature. And then this really nice metal toggle to go between your sport and your normal modes. Now next to that, you've got some very Audi-esque looking controls here. So this is your Mazda Connect control knob, which, like I already mentioned, you use this when you're moving above 5 miles an hour to control the main display. And you do have some shortcut buttons around it. And then next to it, you have your audio control. Now on the Grand Touring and up, you get the upgraded Bose sound system. It is 11 speakers. And then the base models have 6 speakers. So let's go ahead and sample that Bose audio system. I have to say, I'm definitely very impressed by the sound quality of this system. Now moving on up beyond that, another kind of Audi-esque looking thing is your dual zone automatic climate control. This is standard across the board, and you've got these really nice knobs here to adjust the temperature, as well as physical buttons for all the rest of the things, so you don't have to dig around in the display or anything like that. Additionally, on your Touring and up, you're going to find 3-stage heated seats, and you will find 3-stage ventilation if you go for the GT Reserve or the Signature. That's a feature that's really uncommon in the class. But anyways, now that brings us up here to our Mazda Connect system. This is the older style system, but we'll go ahead and take a look. Alrighty, so since Android Auto and Apple CarPlay are the big news this year, we're just going to go ahead and start off there. You plug your phone in via the USB port to the smart USB port, which is in the center console. And then when you do that, you have access to either Android Auto or Apple CarPlay, like I just said. I do want to mention, of course, that this is a touch screen. While you are moving at under 5 miles an hour, you're allowed to touch this. Otherwise, you have to use the Mazda controller down here in the center console. And then this is where you find your apps, like your Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, as well as your Sirius XM TravelLink apps, which gives you weather, parking, and traffic. But anyways, that's pretty much all I'm going to cover of the Mazda Connect system. However, we do have a detailed tech help video available if you want to learn more about it. A link to that is provided in the video description. Alright, so moving on from that, you will find an auto-dimming mirror on the GT and up with your HomeLink Universal Remote. However, it is worth noting that if you go for the Signature, you're going to have the fancier frameless design. And then I am surprised to say that all but the very base trim come with this power moonroof. So that's a very nice touch. As you can see, it is your standard size unit. And you do have a little wind buffer up there. But all in all, I have to say Mazda is continuing to kill it here in interior design. This cabin simply just feels a class above. It feels a lot more premium than what you expect for a midsize sedan. And I especially like that Mazda brings the premium features and the upscale design down to the lower trims, so you don't have to spend a fortune to have this upscale ambience. But anyways, now I'll go ahead and hand it off to my brother to finish up the rest of the cabin.
Alrighty, so coming around to the rear seat of the 2019 Mazda 6, you are going to find a good amount of space for its class. It's technically rated at 39 inches of rear legroom and 37 inches of rear headroom, which does place it behind some of its main competitors like the Honda Accord and Toyota Camry. However, it is pretty class competitive overall. Now turning over to the door trim, it is a super nice door trim, especially for this class of vehicle. So you do have a leather wrapped armrest all the way through here with stitching, and it is even leather wrapped above that, and a soft touch material on the upper portion. Now you do have a nice door handle, as well as a fully automatic window, and down below that you have some bottle storage. Now the seat itself is of course a beautiful design. This is really supple leather, and you do have color contrast stitching going all the way through here. Now here in the center area, you will find these standard vents across all but the very base model, and you would also find heated rear seats on the Grand Touring Reserve and higher. Now coming over here to the center armrest, it does fold down nicely. You have cup holders in the end, as well as a little storage cubby that also includes 2 smart charging USB ports on the Touring trims and higher. Now up top you do have some dome lighting, as well as a nice headliner and an assist grip and coat hook. But overall, like I was saying, this is behind some of its major competitors in terms of space, but behind rear seating position, you are definitely not going to have any issues. So I probably have about maybe about a foot of space between my knees and the seat back, and my feet can easily slide up under the seat. Now even with it scooted all the way back, I can still fit very comfortably back here with several inches of legroom to spare. But overall, this Mazda 6's rear seat is an awesome place to spend time. You have every feature you could ever want back here, it's very comfortable, and it really just has a premium ambience. Now coming around to the trunk, all you have to do to open it is locate this little button under the lid, and it will open right up. Now once inside the Mazda 6's trunk, you are going to find 14.8 cubic feet of space, which is once again behind major competitors like the Camry and Accord. However, it's still plenty of space for almost anybody's needs, so you do have plenty of room back here. As you can see, we have a tripod as well as a camera bag, and there is plenty of room to spare. Now it is also finished really nicely, so we do have a carpeted floorboard. And if you lift up on the floor, you will find a spare tire, and your cargo hinges are covered. Now in addition to that, your seats do fold 60-40 split. Coming over to your passenger seat is that same lovely design, and on this model it is manually adjusting, but if you opt for the GT Reserve or the Signature trims, it is 6-way power. Now in front of the passenger, you will find very abnormally nice materials for its class. So you have a nice leather padded area in front of it, some beautiful trim, as well as a padded dashboard, and down below that you will find a nicely sized glove box. It is dampened. And up top, you have a sun visor with a mirror and light, and it does also detach and has an extension in the end. But anyway, guys, that sums up all the rear areas of the Mazda 6. So now let's go and get on the road and see how that turbo engine performs.
Alright, so let's go ahead and talk about the powertrains. Now, of course, as you all know, starting last year, they added a turbo engine, much demanded, and that is in the majority of the trims actually. So on this Grand Touring Reserve, and the Signature, you're going to have the 2.5 liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine. And it produces pretty good power at 250 horsepower and 310 pound-feet of torque, so definitely a very torque-rich engine. Now if you go for the lower two trims, Sport or Touring, you're going to have a 2.5 liter 4-cylinder engine just without the turbo. And that's going to make 187 horsepower and 186 pound-feet of torque, which is pretty much class competitive. Regardless of what engine you choose, you're only going to have front-wheel drive for now. So if you want all-wheel drive, you actually have to go down to the smaller Mazda 3, since that now has the all-wheel drive system. And we have a 6-speed automatic transmission. So that's the only powertrain change for 2019, is that now the 6-speed manual transmission that used to be in the Sport trim has now been eliminated. So now you go straight to the automatic Sport as the base model. Lastly, as typical for Skyactiv engines, fuel economy is pretty good. So with your base engine, you're going to get 26 city, 35 highway, 29 combined. And then going up to this turbo model is going to penalize you just a little bit to 23 city, 31 highway, 26 combined. Which, for the turbo model, actually compares favorably to the Accord Turbo. But anyways, now let's go ahead and take this out on the road. Alright, so first accelerating in the 2019 Mazda 6 Turbo. Definitely impressive on the power front. Like I already mentioned, this is a very torque-rich engine, so you're really going to feel that power. Down low in the power band, you're going to get it right off the line, and yeah, definitely launches with some pretty serious thrust.
Yeah, definitely. If you don't think that the turbo engine is a benefit, you will once you get behind the wheel. I know it's not a huge power increase, but the torque, like Drew was mentioning, is going to make you definitely feel that increase.
Of course, I'll go ahead and talk about the handling, since that's my favorite thing about Mazdas. Mazda just do their steering and handling just so well. You know, it really adds to the premium vibe, because this is the type of handling setup that you expect in something that's a lot more expensive. And you know, here you are in just a mainstream vehicle, and you've got, in addition to having the really nice cabin, you've got the upscale driving as well. So the handling is just so precise, so balanced. It just really has great feel.
While this car definitely has a lot of power, you will definitely notice that increase over just something normal and everyday. And just riding along here, I do want to mention, in addition to this car having those awesome driving dynamics as Drew was talking about earlier, this car has a absolutely fantastic ride quality. You know, it really, to go along with the luxury ambience of this car, you know, inside and out, you know, it also rides extremely luxuriously. You know, I mean, you hit a bump and you really don't feel it, and these seats are extremely comfortable, and it's just a very hushed cabin. You know, it reminds me of a German luxury vehicle, and that's a great thing.
now let's talk about the transmission. Now at 6 speeds, it is down on gears versus the competition for the most part. But it is actually very smooth. It seems pretty responsive as well. You know, in this class you got a choice of several different types of transmissions. You know, some of the competition does have an 8-speed automatic. However, a lot of the competition goes with a continuously variable transmission. And I would definitely prefer to have this 6-speed automatic transmission over continuously variable transmission. You get more of that traditional feel. It is more responsive. We do also have manual shifting ability and paddle shifters, which we'll try out in just a second. Go into the manual mode and shift with the paddles. Does a pretty good job. It's maybe a little bit slower than the best, like most responsive paddles, but I don't see much of a penalty in terms of, you know, because this is, as we discussed, having the 6-speed automatic makes it a little bit of an older transmission. So when you have an older transmission, that could be a concern that the paddle response will be a little slower, but I'm not noticing anything that's going to bother you when you're cruising along. But overall, I continue to be really, really impressed by the way that the Mazda 6 drives. You know, this is a car that really doesn't seem like you're sacrificing anything. You know, you have a cabin that stands up to the best in the segment. It's very upscale. Even here on this one, that's only $30,000. That is, you know, considered pretty much middle range for a midsize sedan nowadays. So we have this really upscale cabin, really upscale vibe. And then we have driving dynamics, which just are really uncommon for the class, especially when it comes to the steering. I am just, as always, incredibly impressed by Mazda's commitment to make something both, you know, drive and handle well. You know, it feels like it strikes a really fantastic combination of both luxury and really good driving dynamics.
So now let's go ahead and discuss the pricing of this 2019 Mazda 6. Now you are going to find a little bit of a price increase on all of the trim levels this year, and that is most concerning the Sport trim, which is the base trim. So that starts at $23,800 for 2019, which is up $825 over last year, mostly due to the new safety equipment being standard equipment now. And if you want to go for the Touring model, which is the next rung up, that's going to be $26,400. The Grand Touring, which is what we have, is $29,500. The Grand Touring Reserve is $32,000, and then finally you have the Uber Luxury Signature trim, and that's going to start at $35,100. Now Mazda doesn't really do options or anything like that, so we do just have the destination charge for $920, and that brings the total for this particular model as equipped at $30,420. Which I would definitely like to mention is a value for the segment. This cabin feels extremely nice, and this is only $30,000, and a lot in the class can go all the way up to like $40,000, and you're really not sacrificing.
And the turbo.
Yeah, exactly, and you have the turbo engine as well. So this is kind of comparable to like a V6 option and maybe a Camry or something, and that's going to bring you in at a lot steeper of a price point.
Well guys, we've enjoyed watching this in-depth look at the 2019 Mazda 6 Grand Touring. Please hit those like and subscribe buttons if you haven't already, and we'll catch you next time as we sample more of the latest automotive delicacies.